if we're ready to go.
So, she should,
Are we ready to go?
she should begin, and we're ready to go, right?
Yeah.
And then,
And just say,
I'll just
due to
write it
time
down.
constraints, I'd like to move on. You could just do
Okay.
those if you want.
Okay, great. All right. Good morning. This hearing has now come to order. I'd like to welcome our witnesses here this morning. All of you have prepared some very interesting testimony, which is going to be important to the subcommittee members, and we look forward to hearing from you. Because of time constraints, we're going to dispense with our opening statement so that we can hear from you gentlemen. We think that we're going to have votes probably around 10:30, and we would like to get in your written test or your formal testimony before we go to questions. I would just like to do some quick introductions. We have Mr. John Marshall, who's testifying as the member of the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, or the ASEB. We have Dr. Kenneth Ford, the chairman of the NASA Advisory Council. We have Mr. Robert Hanisee, who is the chairman of the NAACS Audit and Finance Committee. Dr. Raymond Colladay, the chairman of the Aeronautics and Space Engineering Board, and Dr. Berrien Moore, who is testifying as a member of the Space Studies Board of the National Academies. And finally, we have Mr. Stevens, who's vice president of Space Systems at the Aerospace Industries Association. These are an incredible set of witnesses, very important for the Congress as we are truly at a crossroads, our country, in terms of NASA's future, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Olson for just a couple of minutes. I'm sorry, Mr. Hall.
That's all right. I'd rather be Mr. Olson. He's about 40 years younger than I am. Well, I think, and I'll be brief because I know time is important, and I think it should be normal that we listen to them before they have to listen to us, but that's not the way it works here. But we're going to get to do that today, and you thank this chairwoman for that. A great panel, and if there's ever a time when NASA and the space station and everybody involved needs advice, we need an advisory group like this. Work hard, advise Norm every chance you get on what he winds up with the final paper. But I'll yield back my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. As our witnesses know, you will each have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. Your written testimony will be included into the record for the hearing, and when you've completed your spoken testimony, we'll begin questions. Each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel, and we're going to begin with Mr. Hall. Mr. Marshall. You're on my brain.
I'm Hall.
I know, and I love you.
Excuse me, she can only say that when her husband, he's an astronaut. She can only say that when he's orbiting.
The ASAP to testify before your subcommittee today. Unfortunately, our panel chair, Admiral Joe Dyer, was unable to participate in this morning's meeting, and he asked me and my colleague John Frost to represent the ASAP in his place. Today you asked us to comment on 6 specific areas, and so let me go right to those. The first was to identify top priorities in upcoming multi-year NASA authorizations. Without question, from the ASAP's perspective, the top priority for this agency is the need to have and maintain a stable and sufficient budget that allows NASA to safely execute an integrated space program. Safety can be an unintended victim of reduced spending if we're not careful. That should not be allowed to happen to this agency. Next, an irrevocable decision regarding extending this space shuttle program needs to be made quickly. If the decision is made to extend the shuttle, then that decision must be accompanied with necessary resources. Without additional budget allocation, all the responsible parties must realize that such an action will seriously constrain available resources for the development of any follow-on program and will only shift and may actually expand the gap in America's flight capabilities. This clearly will expose NASA to the risk of another shuttle loss and may jeopardize the future of the U.S. space exploration program. The next priority is to ensure that cost, schedule, and the required performances are properly in balance with each other. The ASAP feels strongly that the imbalance of any of these key elements will lead to substantial increase in risk. You next asked us to identify critical issues facing NASA. We believe that there must be a reaffirmation or redefinition of a set course for the exploration mission. Hopefully, the Augustine Blue Ribbon panel will do much of this. Even without a change, It's the ASEP conclusion that the recent budget cut of over $500 million makes the current schedule for the exploration program unexecutable. Third, you asked us to discuss NASA's compliance with CABE recommendations. As you know, when the Return to Flight Task Group completed its work in 2005, it had determined that NASA had met the intent of all but 3 recommendations. The ASEP is pleased with the NASA's overall response to the CABE recommendation, yet believes the risk associated with the remaining issues cannot be completely eliminated without major redesign of the shuttle. Accordingly, the ASEP recommends that NASA use its formal risk acceptance process to make a decision on how to close out the remaining actions. The CABE also recommended recertification of the shuttle if it is to fly beyond 2010. The ASEP concurs with the need for recertification if a significant extension of the current program is directed. This said, NASA has not yet developed an action plan to accomplish this. Next, you asked us to discuss NASA's incorporation of safety and risk mitigation in its design of new crewed transportation system. The ASEP has reviewed Orion and Ares developments thus far, and we agree that the issues that have been identified to date are properly being addressed. Issues that have come up like vibration and potential tower strikes have been or are being thoroughly investigated. NASA's role in the COTS program thus far has been to not directly levy NASA restricting requirements. While we endorse and support investing in the COTS program, we believe at this junction that NASA needs to take a more aggressive role articulating human rating requirements for the COTS program, since many new commercial vehicles are already under development. To do so at a later date may pressure NASA into accepting a system for expediency that is below its normal standard for safety. You also asked us to discuss NASA's progress in instilling safety into the agency. The ASEP believes that NASA has continued to improve its awareness and development of a positive safety culture. However, we also believe that more attention is required in the following areas: implement a more robust incident investigation process, develop a standardized way to proactively measure the safety culture at each center, and improve the current technical standards program to better capture and apply hard-won lessons learned and best practices. Finally, you asked us to discuss other matters that merit attention. We, the ASEP, believe that the administration, Congress, and NASA all need to be transparent with the public on risk communication, that losses may occur in space exploration and the risk of this should be mutually shouldered. The national message on the space program needs to be that we're going to do it, but that launching humans into space can never be considered a completely safe endeavor. I'd be happy to answer any questions should you like at a later time.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Dr. Ford, please.
Chairwoman Giffords and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the top priorities and challenges facing NASA. I have submitted my complete testimony for the record, but today I would like to identify and discuss what I believe to be 3 of the highest priorities for your consideration during this potentially pivotal moment in our nation's space program. Choices and decisions must be made that will determine what we can and cannot accomplish in space for the next 40 years. The 3 priorities include developing a capable and flexible space transportation architecture, the need to reestablish a robust technology R&D program, and the need for stability of purpose, policy, and funding. In the few minutes I have, I will address each of these in turn. It is very likely that the space transportation system now under development will serve the nation for the next 30 to 50 years. We need to get it right. This will be the spaceflight architecture that takes Americans beyond low Earth orbit, back to the moon, to near-Earth objects, and onto Mars. The key element in the exploration architecture is the development of a heavy-lift launch vehicle. I urge Congress to accelerate and prioritize development of this capability, as it is the linchpin to everything we will do in human spaceflight beyond low Earth orbit. Accelerated development of a heavy-lift launch vehicle would also help with retaining a skilled workforce, both in production and in the processing that takes place at Kennedy Space Center. The plan has been to apply the workforce coming off shuttle to development of the shuttle-derived heavy-lift Ares 5. Assuming that the International Space Station is to be extended beyond 2015, serious thought must be given to the means of support for both cargo and crew. The current space transportation architecture is intended to provide government-furnished crew access to the International Space Station. As NASA has clearly stated from the outset, if commercial crew access materializes, NASA will utilize that service. Although commercial cargo transport may be available sooner, it seems unlikely that commercial crew transport to the International Space Station will be available before 2015 or 2016, and even then only with a substantial infusion of additional government funding. That said, unless the Constellation program is funded at or above the 2010 budget request, it seems equally unlikely that Ares 1 will be available before 2016 or perhaps even early 2017. In fact, the latest House markup would likely further increase the gap in U.S. government-provided access to space to the point where Ares 1's support of the International Space Station may become irrelevant unless operation of the space station is extended well into the future. NASA has long enjoyed a reputation as a technology innovator whose stressing applications in space and aeronautics have led to an incredible range of broadly useful technologies. Several years ago, the decision was made to divert a large fraction of the agency's technology investment into the Constellation program with the goal of maintaining an early initial operational capability. Unfortunately, technology research programs are easily stopped and terribly hard to restart. In a time of constrained budgets, it will take strong and effective leadership at the agency and by Congress to reestablish NASA as a technology leader. A large part of the public's strong support for NASA derives from the perception that NASA is a driver of innovation and technology. Space exploration is an inherently challenging and rewarding endeavor. Stability in planning, requirements, budgets, and programmatic execution are essential for successful mission accomplishment. The current U.S. space policy is the best one we have had for a very long time. It meets existing commitments and then puts NASA on a new path in an orderly, disciplined manner. The policy strategy was strongly supported by both the 2005 and 2008 NASA Authorization Act in both a Republican and Democratic Congress. It is NASA's job to implement that policy. In my view, the most important factor in NASA's future success will be stability in purpose, strategy, requirements, and funding. If our nation's leadership cannot provide that stability, NASA's efforts to implement the nation's space policy will cost more and accomplish less. In most days, there is very little among the thousands of items filling the 24-hour news cycle that will be regarded as important and noteworthy in 500 years. However, the accomplishments of this agency of the United States government are among the few human activities that will be regarded as having mattered and been important and will be looked upon with admiration centuries hence. They will marvel at the courage, curiosity, and audacity of a people who put the first human footprint on a planet other than their own, who sent robotic ambassadors deep into the solar system not to conquer or for financial gain, but just to know. They will wonder if they could measure up to such people. I look back at the Apollo era and wonder the same thing, and hope that our generation will also be included as worthy of their admiration. We will not have to wait 500 years to know the answer. We are now at a critical juncture in the future of U.S. human spaceflight. I would be happy to respond to any questions you or other members of the committee might have.
Thank you, Dr. Ford. Very moving comments. Thank you. Mr. Hanisee.
Madam Chairman and members of the subcommittee, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss the NASA Advisory Council's key findings and observations related to NASA's financial management activities. I will also touch briefly on the perception of a proliferation of conflicting earned value management approaches within the agency. The fact that NASA has been plagued with financial problems for several decades is well documented. In 1990, the General Accountability Office placed NASA on its high-risk list. And in 2005, the GAO issued a report in which it listed 45 recommendations aimed at improving NASA's overall management. In a separate report, the Inspector General noted that the agency's problems were rooted in historic culture, to wit, NASA centers operated with a high degree of autonomy. Across NASA, there were in use 10 different accounting systems with 120 subsystems. A very significant result of this accounting anarchy was a legacy of unreliable historic data, and that headquarters accounting personnel were inadequately trained. In 2000, well before the GAO report, NASA attempted to consolidate these disparate accounting systems into a new overarching control system, the Integrated Enterprise Management Plan, and 2 years later installed a commercially available core accounting system. Both of these new control systems brought forth a host of new problems that would take years and multiple software patches to fix. In 2006, the headquarters CFO's office prepared a corrective action plan to address the noted deficiencies and specifically to remediate the 4 material weaknesses and 1 reportable condition cited in both the 2003 and 2004 external audit reports. Those deficiencies were financial systems analysis and oversight, property accounting, funds balance with Treasury, general controls, and estimating environmental liabilities. Even though the agency's external auditors continued to disclaim an opinion through and including 2008, the continued hard work of the agency's headquarters and center finance staffs has yielded results. In 2005, the number of material weaknesses dropped to 3, and in 2006 to only 2, and the reportable condition for environmental liabilities dropped off the list. In the 2008 audit report, Ernst & Young stated that, quote, significant progress has been made, unquote, even though they again issued a disclaimer citing the remaining 2 material weaknesses, financial systems and property accounting. With several software patches to the core accounting system, a more stable, better trained accounting staff, and the cooperative spirit of the centers, we believe that the first of these 2 material weaknesses is close to earning a passing grade. The intractable problem is property accounting, particularly as it relates to legacy assets, Space Shuttle, and the International Space Station. The external auditing firm has stated that the agency cannot earn a clean opinion until this accounting data is cleaned up. The IG has opined that the cost to go back and recreate a set of data that would be auditable is too high to justify. Other than running out the clock on shuttle and space station, the only way off the horns of this dilemma would be a change in accounting interpretation from the Financial Accounting Standards Advisory Board, permitting the agency to write off these assets as research and development. If this accounting change comes forth, the door will be open for NASA to merit an improved audit opinion. Now to concerns about potential proliferation of conflicting EVM management systems within NASA. Under the leadership of the Chief Engineer's Office, an Earned Value Management Working Group was created in partnership with the Constellation Program with the objective of developing an agency-wide EVM system to be offered to all mission and centers for single adoption. The NAC Audit and Finance Committee suggested at the October 2008 NAC meeting that the single solution being developed by the working group be adopted agency-wide. Since the Office of Chief Engineer and the Earned Value Management Working Group were already headed in that direction, no formal recommendation was made at that time. In conclusion, the Audit and Finance Committee would like the subcommittee to know that when NASA earns an unqualified audit opinion, hopefully within the next 2 years, that the credit will belong to the hardworking accounting personnel at headquarters and the centers. A specific tip of the hat is due to Terry Bowie, Deputy Headquarters CFO, who is largely responsible for the progress that the agency has achieved. We also have a high degree of confidence in new headquarters CFO Ron Spale. NASA now has a great financial team in place to address the problems in the future. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hanisee. Dr. Colladay.
I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you this morning. Mentioning many aspects of the extraordinary performance of NASA in my formal testimony, I would like to concentrate and focus my remarks here on a concern over the general lack of attention being paid by NASA to technology development as a priority mission area. Because of budget pressures, NASA has largely backed away from the development of space technology as a mission. Once the decision was made to focus research and technology specifically on major development program needs by moving the resources to mission areas it intended to serve, it became near-term oriented as risk reduction, backstopping the hardware development. That isn't to say, of course, that there isn't good technology coming from space science and exploration driven by known program needs. But that's not the opportunity-driven type of research and technology development that I believe NASA needs to pursue and has pursued in the past. That is long-term research driven and defined by anticipating what future program managers will need well in front of requirements, and broad in scope, supporting civil space, not just NASA, and commercial space. NASA has inspired us with bold missions and spectacular accomplishments, and it needs to be investing in technology that continually seeks to transform the state-of-the-art capabilities and enable future missions that someday we know we will want to do if we only know how. NASA should revitalize advanced space technology development as a priority mission area of the agency. It should engage the best science and engineering talent in the country wherever it resides, in universities, industry, NASA centers, other government labs, focused on world-class research and innovation and not driven by the need to maintain core competencies at the NASA centers. It should support not only future NASA missions, but other government agencies and commercial space. So its customers are very similar to the broad scope of customers that its aeronautics program serves by enabling the broad aerospace community with advanced technology and development. That brings me briefly to aeronautics, where there's extraordinarily good news this year, and the restructured program is pursuing fundamental research, stable, and providing excellent results. I'm particularly pleased with the new emphasis on systems research in this year's request. The Environmentally Responsible Aviation Program builds on the progress of the base program and begins to address complex systems interactions, accompanying the integration of technology to achieve lower fuel consumption, lower emissions, lower noise, improved safety, and greater air traffic system capacity, all extremely important to our country economically and in moving goods and services across the country. In the bottom line, I would say my concern is that there aren't sufficient resources, not only for technology development in space and in aeronautics, but the agency has insufficient resources to accomplish what they, and I think the public, expect of them. I've looked at, in every time I have looked at the resources against the program that NASA has on the books right now, I'm led to the conclusion that they need approximately $22 to $23 billion to accomplish what's before them. And I think that is with that amount, it would compete reasonably in discretionary resource expenditures of the country. I look forward to answering any questions you might have later when we get to that part of the morning.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Moore.
Madam Chairman and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today on behalf of the Space Studies Board of the National Research Council, chaired by Dr. Charlie Kenneth. He regrets that he could not be here to provide testimony. In this verbal presentation, let me turn directly to your questions. First, What are the top priorities and issues that the House Committee on Science and Technology should consider in the upcoming multi-year NASA authorization legislation? In a word, balance. The convergence of pressures could significantly destabilize the overall program. Amongst these pressures are to complete and utilize the International Space Station, to retire and replace the shuttle, to define a rational and realizable Moon-Mars exploration initiative, to execute a healthy science program, including meeting the scientific challenges of climate change, and finally, to restore and realize a healthy aeronautics program. All of these pressures gather in an overall NASA framework of 10 healthy centers and OMB 2011 level guidance on budget reductions. All of this strikes me, reflecting my mathematical background, as an overdetermined problem. It cannot all be done. What will give and how it will give is the central challenge facing the House Committee on Science and Technology and facing us all. Second, what are my perspectives on the key challenges and opportunities for space science, and to what extent does the 2010 budgetary address them? The 2010 budget is a significant improvement on FY 2009, but we face real challenges. We simply must do more with less and/or do less with what is available to concentrate the resources. We need to reduce the cost of doing business, fewer managers managing managers. We need to utilize innovative ideas with significantly lower costs to obtain the needed observations. For instance, use alternative platforms like autonomous aircraft or high-altitude, long-stay dirigibles. Use smaller spacecraft and simpler instruments. Avoid the perfect being the enemy of the good. The opportunity is that with change and challenge, we might find a new path that leads to a greater net good by doing business differently, but with honesty. No smoke and mirrors, no cute phrases, but do it honestly and with simplicity. Third, what are my perspectives on NASA's plans and budgetary outlook for accelerating the implementation of Earth science decadal missions, including the use of the Recovery Act funds? Unfortunately, as my written testimony details, the best we can hope for is that the delays will be minimized. Almost all of the monies went to pay for increased cost in the pre-decadal missions: GLORY, Landsat Data Continuity Mission, NPP, the Global Precipitation Mission. If there had been a systemic change, such as making the stimulus monies for Earth science a permanent rebudgeting, then the 2011 and subsequent increases on top of this new base would have provided the necessary profile to execute the decadal missions. And I'd like to call the subcommittee's attention to Figure 1 in my written testimony. Simply stated, that the hole that was dug for Earth science between 2000 and 2006 is simply too deep to crawl out of. It needs a strategic fix. Fourth, what are my perspectives on cost growth and schedule slips in NASA's space science and Earth science programs and their implications and NASA's approach to mitigating future occurrences? I fear that the fixes are too little and too late. We need to have the courage, political and otherwise, to terminate programs that grow excessively. But first, we need to avoid these programs to start with. I believe that with a vigorous pre-phase A, that is significant upfront monies for all of the missions, that is essential. Then, if the technical base is not clearly in hand and very realistic budgets available and agreed to, if those pieces are not there, then the mission is parked until it is ready to start. We must avoid doing something on quicksand or even sand itself. We need a granite foundation, preferably from New Hampshire, reflecting my previous life. Are there any other matters that need attention? There are two. NASA's monies must be multi-year on the commitment side. To go to a one-year commitment process, I think, would not be wise. And finally, there needs to be some consideration on the reduction in the number of NASA centers. The same could apply for national laboratories. What was built in one era is not always useful or needed in the next. We have recognized this with military bases. Why not other national facilities? Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moore. Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Chairman, Chairwoman Giffords, Ranking Member Olson, and members of the committee. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today. AIA is the largest aerospace association in the United States. We represent nearly 300 manufacturers, over 660,000 highly skilled jobs, and we indirectly support over 2 million middle-class jobs and 30,000 suppliers from all 50 states. Our member companies also routinely post the nation's largest manufacturing trade surplus. We appreciate the efforts of Congress to keep the U.S. space exploration policy on schedule. This policy remains essential to reducing the U.S. human spaceflight gap between the retirement of shuttle and the launch of Ares 1 and Orion. NASA's Science Directorate provides us a better understanding of our Earth and universe, and NASA's aeronautics research development projects are crucial to the completion of the next generation air transportation system. Additionally, NASA's endeavors remain an inspiration for our youth to enter our workforce. We strongly support the current proposed NASA budget of $18.7 billion. However, we are concerned about the out years, which are completely flat through 2013. In addition to ensuring stable and robust funding, we make the following observations and recommendations. In the area of explorations, we believe the current policy should be given the support it is needed to keep on schedule. Over the past 5 years, the Constellation program has moved forward, and a great deal of progress has been made. It is now bending metal, it is conducting critical tests, it has produced many jobs that are not only shovel-ready, they're also brain-ready. While we are pleased with Constellation, we are concerned about a couple of other programs. The budget request only provides $25 million a year for Ares 5 and zero funding for the lunar lander. Without moving forward on these vehicles, NASA and industry run the risk of losing thousands of jobs forever. Another important element to our space exploration policy is the International Space Station, which is almost complete and could be conducting possibly groundbreaking research in the very near future. It will also provide valuable lessons for our future voyages, as it functions much like a test lunar outpost or a test long-duration spacecraft. Most importantly, the International Space Station is a prime example of international cooperation in space. We urge the committee to maintain the International Space Station at least through 2020 without taking away from other critical NASA programs. We also recommend Congress to continue support use of NASA's use of commercial launch services and on-orbit services to the International Space Station when they are available. In the area of NASA's Science and Earth Observations program, we believe NASA's Science Missions Directorate is doing important work given the current concerns about global climate change. A healthy science program provides valuable information about the cosmos, and NASA's science and climate change research and developmental programs provide NOAA with operational weather and climate monitoring satellites. We ask Congress to provide stable fundings required to sustain these and our next generation systems. In regards to aeronautics, AIA believes that next gen is critical to continuing the decrease in the environmental impact of aviation. Innovative engine design, airframes, avionics, and materials have resulted in a 75% reduction in noise and a 70% improvement in civil aviation fuel efficiency. These advances, spurred by NASA-funded R&D, have brought the aerospace industries a long way, and the Mission Directorate has been responsible for safety and efficiency initiatives that have saved countless lives. The fourth area I'd like to address is workforce. AIA member companies are investing an average of $10 million a year on STEM education, including Team America Rocketry Challenge, which is the largest rocket contest in the world. Despite the opportunities NASA's education programs aspire to inspire our youth, we are disappointed with the President's request for NASA education initiatives, which is $43 million below the fiscal year 2009 enacted funding level. The last area is commercial space launch indemnification, which will expire at the end of this year. Over the past 20 years, competition from foreign providers, who all benefit from some sort of government indemnification, has grown significantly. We believe that elimination of U.S. government indemnification will drive even more launch business overseas. We recommend Congress remove the current gap of $1.5 billion and eliminate the sunset provision. At a minimum, we request indemnification be extended another 5 years. In conclusion, space technology has become an important part of our economy, our national security, and our future. NASA stands front and center as the most visible representation of the U.S. space program. Its continued work deserves the support from this committee and Congress. I thank the committee for their time and attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, and thank all of you. It's a very diverse group of witnesses, but there is one common thread, which is competence and also commitment. It's always tough here in the Congress where you take experts who have dedicated their careers and decades to a certain area of interest and then to limit testimony to 5 minutes and then have to even cut that a little bit short. But we are glad that you're here. And in particular, these advisory panels on which you serve are voluntary. And the fact that with all the competing demands that you have on your time, that you and your colleagues are willing and able to commit the time is vitally important to our nation. And it's something that this subcommittee plans to continue to utilize your expertise and your dedication to the commitment that we have towards future exploration. We do not have a lot of time. Just so everyone knows, the plan is to get a couple of quick questions in, and then I believe that most of our witnesses can reconvene at 1:30. And Mr. Olson, you're okay at 1:30 as well, correct? Okay, so with that, I'm going to yield my 5 minutes to Mr. Griffith, who will not be able to come back at 1:30. So Mr. Griffith, 5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, thank you, and panel, thank you. We are obviously admirers of you all and human spaceflight, and we recognize that my district, which is we consider in my district the birthplace of human spaceflight, 5th of Alabama, we have a great interest in it. We believe that the Saturn V was the 8th wonder of the world. We think Ares 1 and Ares 5 will be another wonder. Are we satisfied, Mr. Marshall, Dr. Ford, that NASA has done all it can to minimize the human spaceflight gap within its current budgetary constraints and mission requirements? And the second part of that is, do we have an inventory of scientists who have worked on human spaceflight and where they are, and how difficult might it be to reassemble them in a timely fashion?
I'll take it. Yes, I do think that NASA has done all that it can do, given the budget environment that they work in, to eliminate or shorten the gap as much as possible. There's going to be a gap, but I think they've done all they could reasonably be asked to do. In terms of an inventory of space scientists and rocket scientists, I presume, I'm not sure if there is such a thing. I do know that folks that worked on earlier programs, including Apollo, are engaged in advising NASA with respect to Ares 1 and 5.
Let me add from a safety perspective. I also agree that from a safety point of view, they've done everything that they can with the resources that they have to minimize the gap. There's no question that there is a gap. It's a lengthy gap. It appears to be getting bigger, not smaller. But there's only so much that you can do with the resources that have been allocated. The second issue is on workforce management. I will take a little bit of a different stand. I think that we have work to do, the agency has work to do to catalog and make sure that there is clear understanding of where those resources will be available if they need to be at a later date. While we think that the agency has done a great job of putting time and effort into there, we also think from a safety perspective that there's more work to be done if the shuttle program were to be extended or expanded.
Generally, to the entire panel, do we as a nation believe that the Chinese would like to get to the moon before we do? And if so, do we believe as a nation that they're working diligently to do that? Anyone like to take that one?
I'll go ahead and take it. I believe they definitely are, and I think if you take a look at their progress so far and compare it to what we did in the Gemini and Apollo missions, they're making significant progress, and they're using technology that's obviously a lot better than we had back in those days, and I think their goal is set on that. And I think if we don't move along, fund our human space program, we are going to be watching them land before us.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that our committee and those in the audience our worst nightmare is to be at home in our living room watching the evening news, and as the landing occurs, it occurs to everyone in the world that it's the Chinese and not America. And we have an opportunity here, but we've got to keep ourselves focused, and we've got to realize we cannot do this on the cheap. This is not something we can do in an inexpensive way. But we appreciate each and every one of you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Mr. Olson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. And I've got a question, sort of like my colleague, Mr. Griffiths, just for all of you to answer. But later today, you heard the buzzers, but we're going to expect it to pass the FY10 appropriations bill for NASA. And as you all know, that proposes to cut funding $670 million for the Constellation program. And the sponsors of the bill, we've had numerous discussions with them, and I appreciate the chairwoman's role in that as well. They've promised us that they'll work to restore that funding pending the decision of the Augustine Commission. And my concern there, and what I'd like to get your opinion on from a program perspective, what management challenges does this approach impose on the program and the contractors? And can we avoid layoffs if the report comes out in the September-October timeframe? And anybody wants to fire up?
I think it's very unfortunate and is likely to indeed lead to layoffs. The exact number is unclear. I would hope that provision would not stick, but if it did, it would be problematic. Also, the language about one-year money is highly problematic.
Let me,
Mr. Marshall, go ahead, sir.
Let me add, again, from a safety perspective, when you see turbulence within the budget process that creates an on-again, off-again, it always creates a threat to the safety stability. We've seen that in numerous programs before. We've documented that repeatedly. And this particular cut, we believe, will have significant consequences to the agency in being able to stabilize. And in fact, if there was any one theme that I heard from this panel this morning, it was the need to stabilize, to balance, and to provide financial supportability to be able to do all of those things, and it just can't fit right now.
Dr. Colladay, did you want to respond?
I was actually going to say exactly the same thing. Stability is so...
Stole your thunder, huh?
Stability is so critical to the endeavors that NASA pursues, and the turmoil caused in the workforce and by schedules being disrupted by reductions when there aren't enough resources in the first place to do what I think is on NASA's plate is terribly disruptive, and I hope that it can be restored and then some.
I share your optimism as well, and Dr. Ford was getting kind of read my mind and getting ahead, but I just want to talk to all of you about the conversion in the appropriation account from a 2-year account to a 1-year account. I mean, do any of you feel that that's going to be a positive development for NASA, or do we need to stay on the 2-year accounting? Everybody's nodding their heads.
It's a very, very bad idea.
Absolutely.
I think that's essential.
Again, I agree with that. And with that, those are all my questions, Madam Chairman. I'd like to yield the rest of my time to my colleague from California, Mr. Rohrabacher.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to pose a question that I will be coming back at 1:30, and I would give you this time to think about it and then to answer when I get back, because it's a very simple question. When we're trying to figure out what to do with the NASA budget, it's always very easy to come in and say, well, we are lacking this much money. You know, we're $3 billion short of what we need. Maybe you could give us some specific guidance. What are your areas in the NASA budget that are of highest priority to you? What are your areas of the NASA budget are the least priority? And I would expect an answer to both of those questions, because it's very easy to say what you want to spend the money on. But where should we look? What areas of the NASA budget has your least support? Should we be closing centers? Or what center should be closed? Or what should we do? What program should we bolster? But we need some guidance on both of those issues. And if you could give me a very quick answer when we return, that would be very helpful to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rohrabacher and Ranking Member Olson. We have 2 minutes and 23 seconds left to vote, so we're going to run out of here. We're going to recess until 1:30, and we look forward to the members rejoining and our witnesses as well. So until 1:30. Olson's opening statement for the record, and the record will remain open for 2 weeks for any additional statements from the members and for any questions the subcommittee may ask of the witnesses. The hearing is now adjourned.